So it's really dark, of course, I realize that. Sorry for the poor lighting conditions here. But it's really more my voice I wanted to direct your attention to at the moment. I'm actually going for a walk in the woods, which might be difficult for you to tell, but I wanted to think a little bit here among the trees about a presentation and discussion that I want to have at Burning Man next week. I'll be at Camp Cosmocopia, and on Tuesday I'll be talking about sort of in my experience at least, the internal contradictions I have confronted and attempted to work with. The internal contradictions of Burning Man itself as an event. And the contradictions here I'm pointing to are economic, and also thermodynamic. So I want to look at Burning Man in the context of the way that global capitalism really extends and connects energy flows across the surface of the planet, and increasingly now into orbit as well, beyond the surface, and we drill into the interior of the planet as well. So, I want to pay attention to the way that Burning Man is sort of finds itself situated in this default world, that there is global capital and the techno-scientific, industrial machine that underlies global capital, all of it, made possible by science. I want to look at all of that in the context of, well, the actual universe that our species has awoken within. I want to connect economics, in other words, to the physical world, to nature, to the energy event, the 13.8 billion year energy event that the world's most intelligent physicists and cosmologists and mathematicians are trying to introduce us to. The universe that certainly has in some sense been constructed. It's a narrative, ultimately, like any other, but it's a scientific narrative, which means in some way it's as Michael Dowd describes it, who wrote a book called Thank God for Evolution, science is a kind of public revelation. It's a public revelation, a revelation that's made available to everyone through a determinate, clear, distinct method. An experiment, a laboratory situation, which is very accurately and precisely described. Science is full of little techniques that, when an interested person applies them, they find the same thing that the original scientists said they would. Right? So a provable experiment, or at least an experimental paradigm that can guide research and confirm past data, and in that way build up at least a probable image of what we call nature, what we call the physical. So I trust the physicists and the scientists of the world who are telling us about this evolutionary universe, this not just a cosmos, right? Not just a fixed mathematical order, but a cosmogenesis. So an event, an energy event, which in the course of time, of sort of thermodynamic unfolding, of the way that heat travels from, well, one place to another, the way that energy transforms as it passes from one place to another. That's the story of the universe, and whatever human economics, human global capitalist society is doing, it must be somehow a product of this physical energy event. So there's the scene. That's kind of what I want to explore. And the title of the talk is really a set of questions, two questions. The first one is, why is the sky blue? And the second question is, why is money green? At least American U.S. currency, the dollar, the paper that we print, it's green. And for all intents and purposes, at least for now, it certainly seems to be shifting. With the Asian markets and the southern markets booming, it seems like the American dollar won't be the gold standard, the default gold standard of the world for very much longer. But be it that as it may, however that plays out, we print our money the color green. And if we look at global capitalism as a kind of religion, ultimately, a sort of ritualistic public practice, where we together publicly agree to protect something we call private, something we call ownership or capital. We as a public agreed to do that and enforce the freedom of the individual, the private, separate ego, the rational agent that is interested in its own affairs and in profiting from the conduct of its affairs. And I wonder, when I think about this agreement that we all supposedly made with one another to enter into private exchange to the market of competitive entrepreneurship and business, I wonder about what it means ecologically, and what the effect that it has on the surrounding ecologies which in with it takes place. Because when we talk about ownership, it's a certain way of thinking about what the physical world is, what nature is. And ownership, or capital, to look at nature that way is necessarily to break it up into discrete units of value, right? Capital, etymologically, it comes from the same word for cattle that we use for cattle. It's a head of cattle. So when you talk about your capital, you're really asking, how many cows do you have? How many horses? How many goats? How many chickens? How many heads? How many slaves, animal slaves, do you own? So it's looking at nature as a competitive affair, the struggle of existence between discrete individual organisms who each are after their own, have their own self-interests. And what that leaves out, I think, why I wonder about the so-called capitalist social agreement. I wonder, though, when did we really agree to this? But I wonder whether to pay attention only to animals with heads, that it leaves out, well, actually most of nature, right? First of all the single-celled organisms like bacteria, for one, that also really make life here on Earth possible and outweigh humans in terms of biomass by a long margin, and have existed, many times, orders of magnitude longer than the human species has. Bacteria has been around since the beginning, almost 4 billion years. And if we only pay attention to encephalized, multicellular, animals, metazoa, that have developed these internal nervous systems, then we miss that other, very distinct form of life that dominates really anything we might describe that has a head or eyes or something complex like that. Mammals, primates, we're a very ephemeral layer of Gaia, ultimately. And so global capitalism is paying attention to the units, to the individual animals, and ignoring, that other dimension of the organic that can't be whose boundaries can't be neatly drawn. Bacteria share genes laterally all the time. There's not a sort of lineage, individually or family lineage that involves sexual reproduction with bacteria. Bacteria are just constantly rubbing off on each other and getting into each other's business, and they just share. It's a gift economy. It's not, oh, my genes are trying to selfishly replicate themselves. No, it's, what do you got? Here's what I have. Oh, that's cool. It's just this. In many ways, it's like shopping, except you're not really buying genes as a bacterial cell, right, from other bacteria. You're because you're not, you're just sharing. It's not as if you owned the gene. You're just trying to dance with your partner and share these strange frisbees that you've been gifted with. And I think we can learn as capitalists, to the extent that we are capitalists, or admit that we are addicted to capitalism and are trying to recover from it, or whatever our relationship to capitalism is. I think we could learn from the way that bacteria undergo business with one another and do their bacterial dance. It's a gift economy, right? And, the other kingdom of life